Figs were the candy of the ancient world, the fruit of the gods, or perhaps the one true god. Today, figs are not particularly popular, at least in the Western world. You'll have a hard time finding in a typical grocery store. However, long before apples were popular or grapefruits even existed, figs were not only eaten and cultivated, but also the subject of poetry, art, and even worship. Fig trees are deciduous, meaning that their leaves will fall on occasion. Granted, their range in the fairly warm climates of the Middle East mean that this isn't quite as drastic as what you'd see with oaks and maples. As unholy as it sounds, the fig is dependent on wasps, or at least in warm, fairly dry climates. Fig wasps are born in figs. Their larvae live inside them, and while it doesn't make for a particularly appetizing treat, it does play a critical role in pollination. After wasps, humans took the most interest. They were one of the first fruit bearing trees to become domesticated, most likely in the Middle East and the Mediterranean basin. Cultivation of the fig dates all the way back to the Neolithic age, the last segment of the Stone Age when humans started to take up farming. Most domestication during that time probably involved animals and grains, but figs provided the closest thing to Stone Age dessert. With the help of wasps, fig trees are one of the easiest to grow and spread on farmland. And at a time of intense physical farm work and no McDonald's McFlurries, the high sugar content they provided was essential to fueling human bodies. Obviously, high caloric intake is a relative term today as red velvet cheesecake exists. But at the time, no red velvet cheesecake existed, so fruit were a very good sugary alternative. The domestication of the fig was most likely one of the earliest, most likely predating wheat and rice, only outdone by rye. Through natural selection, humans, selected for figs that would not only be hardy but also bear more flesh, more sugar, and more durability. Around the Dead Sea, in what is now Israel and Jordan, remains the petrified figments of, figs, found over 12,000 years ago. It's no wonder they're so prominently featured in the Bible. Speaking of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible specifically, mentions fig cakes, in which figs were dried and pressed into loaves, which could be preserved over a longer period of time than their fresh counterparts. The book of Genesis mentions Adam and Eve, using fig leaves to cover their mommy and daddy parts after eating the fruit. Some have speculated that the fruit in question was referring to the fig, not, say, the apple, which is usually depicted in Western art as Westerners, or at the very least Europeans at the time, by and large did not have access to figs. Figs don't feature prominently in the books of Exodus and Leviticus, but they do feature prominently in Deuteronomy, in which they are part of the Promised Land's essential groups of foods, along with olives and pomegranates. Rather strange as Israel and Palestinian territories today are not geographically, let's just say, vibrant, but pretty barren. God should have promised them Costa Rica. There are numerous other mentions of figs in the Judeo-Christian canon, but I will take a break from that for a moment to move northward to Greece, where Aristotle was laying the foundations of Western botany. He recorded the fig tree's reliance on fig wasps. A century after, Herodotus was setting the foundations of Western historiography. During the wars between the Greek city-states, which had united, and Persia, on the other hand, the Persians, while being far more powerful, ended up losing. Not so much in Herodotus' eyes to poor military strategy and morale, but rather, at least according to him, a lack of figs in their diets. Then again, this is the guy who talked about dog-headed men. The Phoenicians and the Greeks spread their love of pigs around the Mediterranean, and the next major power to be the big bully on the block, the Romans, would take a liking to the figs as well. And they spread it northward in climates that they were not exactly well suited for. The first emperor of Rome, Augustus, was rumored to have been killed by a fig laced with toxins by his wife. Granted, it's hard to confirm this since the trope of the murderous wife is common in Roman lore. Pliny the Elder, the father of the Natural Encyclopedia, mentions figs in his chronicles of all of the examples of life that existed within the confines of the Roman universe. Speaking of the Romans and Augustus, one man who was walking around the Roman Empire during that time was Jesus. You might have heard of him. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus states, quote, "Look at the fig tree. As soon as they come out in leaves, you see yourselves and know that the summer is already here. So, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. I say to you, this generation will not pass away till this has all taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." In many ways, this has been interpreted as a way in which figs sprouting symbolized the coming kingdom of God. However, they were also used in a more, let's just say, pessimistic tone. In the same Gospel of Luke, a parable mentions the barren fig tree. Quote, "A man had a fig tree planted in his garden, and he came looking for the fruit, but did not find any. So he said to the gardener, 'Look here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and I still have not found any figs. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting soil?' The gardener replied, 'Sir, let it alone for 1 more year, until I dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good, but if not, you can cut it down.'" There are numerous interpretations from this parable. Some say that it's a sign that one has made mistakes in the past but can improve themselves in the present. I will let you interpret it as you wish. In the Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad was a fig connoisseur. In medieval Arabia, figs were eaten by Bedouins for medicinal purposes, including the curing of hemorrhoids. So if your anus hurts, eat some figs. They weren't completely wrong, by the way. Compounds in figs are sometimes used in modern-day laxatives. The holy mixed with the profane. However, it is not just the classical and the Abrahamic worlds that had a liking to figs. Long before Islam or Christianity ever existed, Buddha was said to have achieved enlightenment under a fig tree. This tree is known as the Bodhi tree, which I am almost certainly mispronouncing, or known as the Tree of Awakening. There's literally a species of fig native to the Indian subcontinent that is considered to be sacred in the eyes of many Hindus, Buddhists, and other peoples of faith. And it is one of the earliest domesticated in the region, dating back to the Indus River Valley civilization, even before the arrival of Indo-Europeans. Hindus oftentimes consider the fig tree to be the king of trees, and their shade offers a place for meditation. As history moved on, the bulk of action moved away from the warm, dry Mediterranean and Middle East and Indian subcontinent and northward towards the regions of Europe and East Asia, regions not particularly conducive to figs in mass. Figs lost much of their relevancy in the modern world. Nonetheless, they are still mass cultivated in the Middle East in countries like Turkey and Egypt. Even though its spotlight has passed, this fruit provided subsistence at a time of scarcity, and it's no wonder why it inspired not only our bodies to produce the civilization that we have today, but also the spiritual world and the realm beyond our innate senses. Thanks for watching.